So, today I have a very special guest. My wonderful pastor, my cousin. He's been a staple in my life. He's been a wonderful example in my life, and he is my pastor. Pastor Keith Barr Jr. It's good to have you here today.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yes. I had when the Lord had told me to get back to doing my podcast because I had stopped for a little bit, and I was looking to get different guests because the first season I had Sister Quell and I had Tina and such, so I wanted to kind of venture into some other things, and you were one of the first ones that popped up in my spirit, so had to have you here. Had to have you here and talk about some wonderful things. So, God is good. God is good. And I hope you enjoy it so we can continue to do more things like this.
Okay.
And so I pray that you all enjoy this wonderful conversation we're going to have today here on God Talk with Gabriel. Back to the work again, back on this grind. Back on my feet to stand, back to the times. Back to deliverance, still in my prime. Back so the thoughts won't keep pressing my mind. So, Pastor Gino,
Mm-hmm.
you've had a very full life so far, I'd say. What in your life would you say is one of the craziest things that's happened to you since you've been saved? Whatever experience or something God did, a miracle, doesn't even matter.
Well, for me, it's a little difficult at first, especially when asking the question because I've seen so much, and we're a Pentecostal church, and I've grown up in it, so I've seen a multitude of just about everything that you probably could see.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'd have to think probably one of the craziest things um, was when we were we were in revival, and um, somebody had came up to the up for prayer, and because something had happened. I don't want to go into details because I don't want
Mm-hmm.
to too much details because of the family um, privacy. But one of the family members had a spirit, had a demon, and so they started to cast a demon out.
Mm.
And I was and what wound up happening was I was the one holding, like, because you always hear stories of like demons getting cast out and then they vomit or something,
Yeah.
coughing up blood or whatever. So I'm the one holding the bucket,
Like the
and
offering bucket or the
the
vomit
the
bucket?
vomit bucket.
Wow.
And I was actually closer to the person than I am with you right now.
Wow.
Like I was like behind my dad. And I got to stand there, show no fear, and try to operate in faith.
Mm-hmm.
Praying to command the devil come out. But then I turn and look, and my mother has taken up the rest of my sisters and have gone to the far back corner of the church, as far as back as she could in the sanctuary.
Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of like I got left, you know, and I'm standing there, and I'm commanding, and then he would lock eyes with me, and I just, you got to stand and just kind of, operate faith, tell it come out. And it was times where you saw his neck kind of bulge up,
Mm.
but then he would swallow it back down and say it's not coming out.
Wow. Jeez. That's great. Yeah. That's pretty. That's pretty interesting. So what happened? Did
Uh, the thing was he didn't want it to come out,
mm-hmm.
so they my father he they rebuked him, they rebuked the spirit so that it wouldn't cause any harm to anybody.
Right.
And so they so nothing ever no nothing ever else happened,
Mm-hmm.
you know, where like a family was or somebody else was in danger that that we know of. But yeah, so that was probably the craziest thing.
How old were you?
Um, I was a teenager, mid-teens, I'd say.
Yeah, man, that's that is crazy. Uh I haven't seen too many demons cast out. I do remember there was a demon that manifested when I was at this Christian Bible study thing, and they cast it out, but it took them some time.
Mm-hmm.
But all the times that I've been in our ministry, that was something that was an area that that we flowed in the casting out of demons. And I think a lot of people, some people think it's fake, that that stuff doesn't happen. And for you to experience that at such a young age just kind of shows, like, God just kind of threw you in it early.
Mm-hmm.
And so you've had a long Christian life. So what is your testimony? Like, how did you come to Christ?
Well, grew up in it. My dad, my dad, my dad and my mom, my dad, and my grandmother pastored our church.
Mm.
Um, so before I remember, I had a suit. Matter of fact, I couldn't even wear jeans till I was like to church till I was like 18, 19
Man, yeah,
on a Friday night.
yeah,
Because I tried it one time. Because I tried wearing jeans one time. He said, "What are you doing with jeans on?" And the only thing, he snapped at me, so I kind of like panicked for a second. And so then I named one of our other cousins that wear jeans.
yeah,
I'm like, "Well, such and such wear jeans." He said, "He ain't my son, and this is my house."
yeah. Certainly
So he
sounds like
made me
your
put on a
father.
suit on a Friday night. So that's why I never wore jeans.
Mm-hmm.
I rarely wore khakis.
Mm-hmm. Suit pants, dress pants.
It was dress pants. It was dress pants slacks. Had to. Couldn't get away from it. And the only reason why I was able to slightly get into it because my sister started wearing blue jean skirts.
Mm. Yeah, yeah.
So
That'll
then
do
I
it.
could say, well, if they're wearing blue jean skirts, why can't I wear blue jean pants?
Yeah.
Yeah. Um. Yeah. So I've grown up. I've grown up in it my entire life, constantly around it. Um. We and you spend all your time in the church growing up.
Mm-hmm.
Um. I it used to be a joke when we after you come back, from like summer vacation, kids would ask where'd you go. I would just give the address to the church because you was there all the time.
Yeah.
And um and then my dad would always go up to the church to work on something, and then you just be stuck there
All day.
all day.
Yeah, that does sound rough. I do remember being at the church a lot, but definitely probably not as much as you guys were.
Mm-mm.
So yeah, I can see how that would how that would just kind of just fester you into being in it all the time. Like,
Yeah,
everywhere he goes, you go.
and there was no cable in the church. This was before cell phones and really Game Boys or you being allowed to bring your Game Boy in the church.
Mm-hmm.
It was just, you were stuck in there all day.
Yeah.
And then when you finally thinking about you're about to go home, it's like, okay, let's come together for prayer.
Oh, yeah. Ain't no telling how long that gonna be.
Yeah.
So, I mean, to most people, that would sound like a very strict household to be in.
Mm-hmm.
So, and a lot of people who grow up in maybe similar households tend to rebel and go in the opposite direction, just, because they want freedom. So, what was that moment for you where it wasn't because, your father told you to, or you know, because everyone around you was pressuring you? When was that moment where you said, "I'm coming to Christ because I want Jesus"?
It was always presented as something that you would want.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, my, stuff like that. It does sound at times it does sound strict or boring or sometimes harsh or whatever. But um, we still we got to be allowed to be kids, but we were still able to be kids and played like kids, like going outside and playing and stuff when we were home,
Mm.
you know. Um, but when it came time for ministry, it was time for ministry.
Right.
Um, my and then you had fun at church
Mm.
most of the time. It was just when you mad and ready to go because you've been there all day. That has nothing to do with the service.
Right.
That's you stuck there while your dad's working.
Makes sense.
Um, so but it was fun at church. You always had music, good music. Um, you always had you always it was a move of the spirit. So it was people falling out. It was shouting and stuff. There was other kids there that you laughed and joked with, and then my dad and my grandmother were fun. They were fun. They were funny.
Yeah.
My grandmother, when um, if she prayed for you, she'd like smack your head. She'd pow, and then just like tap it like.
Mm.
And so it was like we had like one of our cousins, Terry. He told us he's gonna get in line. He said, "Mom had mad at me, so watch how she hit my head." And so that he got in line, and you heard throughout the entire service, the church just pow,
Mm.
how she hit him in the head. um, but it was cool. I mean, it was fun to see how people responded to the anointing. Um, and my father never treated ministering as tedious or hard work.
Mm-hmm.
To them, that was fun,
Right.
and so I think that was the appeal to it.
Uh-huh. That that it that's actually beautiful that your father, for those who don't know, uh his father he was our apostle. He was a pastor before he became a pastor, and he's my uncle. And for him to present the gospel and present Jesus in a way of, not just a strict parent or just someone who doesn't want you to have any fun, but to present to him as someone who does want you to have fun, who wants you to have a blessed life, an abundant life. And in doing that was able to show you that, this is something that you should want,
Mm-hmm.
and that you would want. And so, what was that day like for you where you finally said, I received Christ? Do you remember it? Some people don't even remember it.
No, I don't.
Been in
I
it so
don't.
long.
I don't remember the day. I don't remember going up to the altar. I
Hmm.
just I think it was just a confession that I made to other people.
Hmm. That you
Um,
were saved.
yeah,
Yeah.
because I remember it was like we still did. I played football in school when I was a kid, and I remember we were at a game one Saturday, and somebody came up to dad and was talking about church and stuff, and he looked at me. He said, "You saved, son?" And I just said, "Yeah." He said, well, "You better be." And then him and my dad busted out laughing. But it was just I can't remember. Like my dad, he can tell you. I think his was like March 23rd or something like that.
Yeah.
Um, one of my sisters, they could probably tell you the dates that they got saved. I don't remember.
Hmm.
I can't give you a specific day.
Hmm.
I can give you specific dates of when I got specific words, or I could talk about various times where God, moved,
Yeah.
and it was like one of those awe-inspiring moments.
Yeah.
But I can't tell you the day that I made that
You
I
know,
got saved.
and that raises an interesting point because some people think that it's the prayer and and all of that really makes you save, whereas you not even remember the exact date, but it was how you lived and how you presented the gospel and how you lived your life that proved that you had saved. Because there's a lot of people that say that they're saved and able to quote the day, but they're not really living it. But you were really really living it, and you've been living it for as long as you have, to the point where you can't even remember the day, because it's not so much about the prayer that was said as much as it is about the life that you're living.
Hmm.
And so that's really, I don't even remember. Well, I remember the day that I got saved a little bit, Like I don't remember the date, but I do remember the night before our cousin Jamal, he had stayed the night, and I was talking to him, and I'm just like, so I was like, what do you think would happen if I just got saved tomorrow? And he was just like, I don't know, man. Maybe the heavens would open up or something. And because I was just contemplating it, and then the next day we had service. This is when we were having service at the house, and
Mm-hmm.
in Clarkston, and uh, I think your father has said, he just felt in the spirit that we were missing something, like something that God wanted to do something else in the service. And that's when I had got up and just said, I want to receive Christ. And everyone's praising, and Sister Sharon, and everyone's just, you know,
Yeah, it was because you got up and you got had the mic, and it almost seemed like you was rambling for a minute. So I didn't know where you were going with it. It wasn't until the end when I realized what you were doing
hmm
when you turned to dad and you asked him to lead you in prayer for salvation.
yeah, see, I
And
don't even remember that.
yeah, and I remember some of them like Isha jumped up and was like crying, and um, some of the other women was crying and stuff, and it was just but it was a shock because I just didn't know where you were going.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you would testify you may ramble a little bit,
Yeah.
so I
Yeah.
just didn't know if he was just like we were just on another journey or something. So I had no idea, had no clue.
Yeah. Talking has always been a trait of mine. But yeah, it was a blessing, to receive salvation. And, I came up obviously in church and everything, but my parents weren't pastors, and or neither one of them were pastors. But, you coming up as a PK or
Hmm.
a pastor's kid, and you alluded to some of it earlier, but just, you know, outside of, just being in church all the time, what was it like just growing up as a pastor's kid? Not only that, but for those of you who don't know, he is the only boy of six sisters. And, you being the only male in the house outside of your father, and your father being a pastor and, doing so many things for the church. What was that like for you growing up?
Uh, well, the key thing is that my father was the same person in the church as he was at home.
Mm,
Um, and because I think I think that's one of the major issues, with kids growing up is that um, people go to church all the time, and they live as they portray like they lived a saved life, but it's the difference when they come home.
mm-hmm,
And so people, you go to church, pay your tithes, do your offerings, sing in the choir, do the praise team, usher. You can stand there and hold the offering bucket or whatever.
mm-hmm.
Greet people when they come in. But if you doing anything and everything outside, um, it it's um, it's like it's being a being in ministry. You have to be like a two-headed coin,
Mm-hmm.
basically.
Mm-hmm.
Is that if your stuff get flipped over, you still gonna be the same.
Right. Right.
Um, I think that's probably the easiest way I can explain it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you want to, because if your kids growing up and they see, they can see the pastor maybe 6 hours out the week,
Mm-hmm.
but they got you the rest of their lives.
Right.
So, the pastor can't be the example that the kids see and want to continue to live for God.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be the example.
Exactly.
And so my parents, they were the example. Like my mother, she's not a bombastic person. She's not an outspoken person. Really, she's not. She didn't really take charge of stuff in the church, but because you also had my grandmother who passed
Mm-hmm.
away with my father too, so she did a lot of those tasks that maybe my mother would have had to have done,
Mm-hmm.
which that's not something my mother would want to do anyways.
Right.
So she's a very she has a very simplistic faith when it comes to her walk.
Mm-hmm.
But her and my dad, they were always, even my grandmother, they were always the same. And it was we were raised on the importance of praying, of coming together as a family, praying and seeking God, but then also maintaining your walk with Christ. Um, so we've always had those examples. But then also being a PK, you're put underneath a microscope,
Right.
um, whether you want to or not.
Mm-hmm.
You're put under a microscope because we're not just a representation of our parents; we're a representation of the ministry.
Mm-hmm.
And and so we have seen people that were family members of leadership that sometimes you would see family drama being brought into the church.
Right.
And so, because, with my dad, he traveled around the country. They travel around the country, and then and that's another thing. He would bring us with him.
Right.
And he would get us involved as much as we should be,
Mm-hmm.
because there's certain things as kids we shouldn't be introduced to.
Exactly.
Um, because I remember one time we went to a convention, and they were doing, and the women did this thing where pastors' wives would they had like this pajama party or whatever at one of the women's rooms. So all the pastors' wives, pastors' daughters or whatever, they had to wear pajamas, but they all went together and like chit chat and fellowship in one of the rooms. And so one of the women, she started crying because she was upset. She was just airing out past hurts because Daddy wasn't home
Mm.
because he was all out on the road ministering. And and so she was lamenting about how um she didn't have she didn't have her father in home, but then also now she's a mother, and so she doesn't want to do the same thing to her daughter.
Right.
And so then an older woman, an older pastor's wife came up and hugged her and stuff, and was it's just a bunch of sadness in the room because obviously this isn't the only one who feels this way. And so an older pastor's wife came over and hugged her and comforted her, and she said, "This is the burden that we have to bear." And so then my sister who's in the room, she's sitting up herself, sitting there like, "Why didn't y'all go with him?"
Mm.
She's like, "This is ridiculous." Like all these women in here crying and sad and stuff, and my sister, who is maybe in her early 20s at the time, is just standing there going, just sitting around like, why ain't y'all go with him? Why ain't y'all involved in it with him?
Yeah.
Because that's the other thing. My dad, we went, at times I was 9, 10 years old with him on an Indian reservation in Canada ministering,
Mm-hmm.
you know, um, or going to different country churches around the country and stuff. I've gone with him.
Mm-hmm.
He took us with him. We were involved when we went to the Indian reservation when we was a kid. It was a 3-day drive. It was a 3-day drive from Pontiac, Michigan, to almost Calgary, Alberta, Canada.
Uh-huh.
And so he said that and he brought comic books, and we had stuff so that as kids we could be entertained in the back. He said, but when you in this passenger seat next to me, you can't do nothing but be praying.
Mm-hmm.
He said, because I'm going to an area that really there's nobody else praying. It's gonna be just us.
Right.
And so I need you. Y'all can be back there, playing around and stuff. That's fine. But when you up here, you got to be praying.
Mm. Yeah. So you growing up, he engulfed you guys in the ministry,
Yeah.
and obviously, you see what a lot of other pastors, they keep their ministry separate from their family. They look at it more so as this is a job that I have to do, which it is a job, but they don't allow their family to be in it with them.
Right.
And whereas your father took a different perspective as, I'm going to bring you guys into the ministry because, the ministry is his life.
Right. And if you also think about it too, other parents, parents and stuff, they get their kids involved in their activities and their hobbies and stuff that they like.
Right.
Because you're not gonna be a fan of uh, let's say this is Michigan. So you can't raise somebody. You can't be a fan of the Pistons and then let your child raise be a fan of the Bulls. You don't take them to the Bulls games.
To the Pistons
You take them
games.
to the
Yeah.
Pistons games.
Right.
You give them Pistons jerseys. You give them Tigers jerseys.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but you give them Lions jerseys. You take them to the games. You get them involved. When you sit there and watching the game, you want them to watch the game with you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, or if like a sport or video games or anything else, you have your kids involved and invested in the things that you enjoy. Why not do the same thing with ministry?
Right. That makes sense. And it's crazy that people that are coming up as pastors' kids, they get such a bad reputation. Like, and it's like you said, because they're under a microscope, and everyone just assumes that they have kids, so their son is probably going to be a pastor, or their daughters are going to marry pastors and things like that. And did people ever project those expectations on you, of you just following exactly in your father's footsteps?
No, not even my father projected that on me.
Wow.
Um, his thing was because his pastor, I don't think any of his kids at first wanted to do anything with ministry themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just a thing. So it's kids following in the parents' footsteps when it comes to ministry. That's not always going to happen.
Right.
So no, that's not something that he projected on me. Actually, it's something that I projected on myself.
Wow.
Because when I was in the second grade, they always ask kids, "What do you want to do when you grow up?" I chose, I wrote down I was going to be a pastor,
Mm.
and the reasoning behind that was as a kid, I wanted to be just like Daddy.
Yeah.
But obviously, over the years, that's not enough to maintain. I've gotten older to the point where that's not enough for a purpose.
Exactly.
So no, but that was never put on me, not even by him.
Wow.
He didn't actually. When I mentioned us going to the Indian reservation,
Mm-hmm.
when and I was 9,
Mm-hmm.
and it was one day we were at the altar because we had the service in the tent, and I just started lifting my hand. I lifted my hands and I just started crying like the anointing was in the room, and um and there was no words that was said. There was no I can't tell you what I was thinking at the time, but I just stood there in the dirt with my hands lifted up crying. And so then my father, he looked at me, um and so then he began to watch me. But what I didn't realize until after the fact, after we had left and gotten back to the house we were staying in, is that I was in that state for over an hour.
Mm.
Like I didn't move. Like my feet didn't shift. Because sometimes we stand. We shift our weight and stuff when we're standing. Like I didn't move
Mm-hmm.
at all. And so then while he was standing there watching me, and he was like, "God, what are you trying to do with my son?" And that's when he realized that there may be something that God, was had us, that God had a purpose for me in terms of ministry. Um, and so it was after that then he started to get me more invested or involved in stuff. Like when I got a little bit older, then he started having me on the pulpit working like the audio tapes,
Mm-hmm.
and it wasn't. So then after I started doing, managing the audio tapes and recordings and stuff, people asked for copies of tapes of the services and things. They started going back to him and saying this, saying that I was doing a really good job. Another thing is that being a PK is that um, you were you were underneath a microscope where you couldn't do anything, you couldn't say anything. I had made a joke one day in church that with being a PK, you couldn't do any wrong.
Mm-hmm.
You know, other kids could do anything and everything else. Got arrested, lied, stole something, you know.
Yeah.
But I can't have an attitude. Cause like, "Ooh, ain't you the pastor's son?" and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
You know. Cause in the joke, and I said, "You got your VIP ticket to hell," but I can't. I can't have an attitude. Cause, and so like my sisters and I, it's kind of like an unspoken rule with us is that we ain't gonna cause no drama at no church or no function.
Mm-hmm.
Like if something pop off, we could be upset, but then we're not gonna add to the drama
Right.
because we understand that we are a representation of our parents
Mm-hmm.
and of the ministry,
Right.
and we have let stuff slide
Mm.
because we weren't going to add to the drama. It was one thing with one of my sisters that somebody said something on the day that she was getting ordained.
Mm.
He got into her face and then said some things, and so she had to let that. They had to let that slide because they weren't going to pop off. And this is, and which one I'm talking about. She would have popped all the way off,
Yeah, she would have.
and it would have been a huge mess because then that person obviously didn't have enough respect for the moment, for the engagement, for what was about to happen, but they decided to try to cause a scene, and probably knowing that she wasn't going to say anything because of the event.
Mm.
And so there's a lot of people that has gotten away with stuff because we understand
Can't.
you can't.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's unfair, but let that stuff happen again outside of these events. We'll let you know about yourself.
Right. Right. Yeah. And I think that's a testament to you guys just having the self control and the maturity to know that regardless of how people act, members or whatever, I am a representation of this ministry, and I am a representation of my Father, and more importantly, I'm a representation of God, and I'm not gonna let these people throw me off of my character, especially here in the ministry
Mm-hmm.
and here at church. So that's really beautiful, and I think a lot of a lot of pastors' kids don't always have that. They don't always have that restraint or that maturity because again, that microscope, especially it starts really at a young age when you're born, and that people just expect you to be perfect, to never make mistakes because you're the pastor's son or you're the pastor's daughter, and
Mm-hmm.
like I said, for me, I didn't. My parents weren't pastors, but everybody knew that my family was saved. Whether they knew through my mother or through your father, they knew that I came from a saved family. A lot of them knew the church that I was in. So even though I wasn't a pastor's kid, still couldn't do much because they know who my uncle is and they know who my parents are.
Right.
And so in moments where I may have wanted to act out, I couldn't. I had to exercise restraint. I had to exercise maturity because I represent my parents, I represent the church, and I represent God. And it's hard to do that,
Yeah.
and respect to y'all for doing it at such a young age.
And then some people actually want you to fail,
Mm-hmm.
so they can turn around and say, and they can turn around and look at and kind of gloat
Mm-hmm.
because a pastors, unfortunately, our job is to minister to people and sometimes tell people what they can't do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so
Exactly.
then if they see your kids doing anything and everything else, then an indictment against, somewhat of an indictment against you.
Right.
And so then, it's a way to just like knock people down a peg.
Mm-hmm.
And some people just want to knock people down a peg,
Yeah.
you know.
That's true. That's true. And a lot of pastors' kids tend to go down a rebellious path. And I was at a church not too long ago, and Pastor, I brought up a point and said, rules without relationship breeds rebellion. So people who, like parents who set strict rules but don't develop a relationship with their child, oftentimes that will lead to them rebelling. And, but in you guys' household, it was different. Whereas your father had rules, he had standards, but he also took the time to develop a relationship with you guys and bringing you into the ministry, showing you the things that he does, the things that he goes through. And even outside of that, taking an interest in the things that you may have liked or things that you wanted to do. And I think him doing that kind of helped you guys to avoid that typical pastor's kid lifestyle that you know they the reputation that they tend to get. And that's a testament to your father and a testament to you guys.
Yeah. And then it depends on your perception of things too. Because you could still present me you could present me a glass of water and the glass is 75% full, but I can still focus on the fact that it's 25% empty. Half glass full, half glass empty, that whole perspective. And so at times you can, because honestly, I can say this because I know she wouldn't mind. She'd be the first one to say it out loud herself. But like my oldest sister, Gina, she, you know, growing up, she didn't want to do anything really with ministry. I mean, she did stuff because she was involved because she had to. And maybe there's a part of it that wanted to at some point. But really, she didn't want it.
Right.
She looked at the same things I did and saw and experienced the same things I did. And there was things that, people in the church or, family things or something like that, she would look at it and she was like, I don't
want to go through that.
This juice ain't worth the squeeze.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it's their perception because we saw the exact same things. But I focus on the glass half full.
Right. That's good. That's a good thing. That's a good place to be. And, your father being, the pastor and the head of a church, and, you had said people never put that projection on you to follow in his footsteps, but it's something that you wanted to do. When did you, I mean, you said when you were younger, that's when you wanted to, but when did it start to really become a reality that, I really do want this thing. I want to be a pastor.
Well, as the years progressed, started getting words about me being a preacher, following through in ministry. But like with me, as with most people, you can have a dream as a child or an aspiration as a child, but then when you get older, things change, perspectives change. And so when I was like I was 15, 16, I was kind of starting to come to a crossroads because, I knew God had a call on my life. I knew that I was called to minister, to be a pastor, and but now I'm 15, 16. I have a job now. I have goals. I'm finding myself having other goals outside of ministry.
Right.
And so then there was a conflict on the inside of me because, I know I'm not supposed to do this, but I kind of want to do this too. And so how do I reconcile that? Well, I went to God and I said, I know I'm supposed to do this, but I kind of want to do this too. And, so I'm starting to have other dreams and aspirations outside of ministry. And I said, if you want me to, I'll turn that away and do what you call me to do. And so then I had gotten a word in, it was like that June, it was like what years? That was 2000. And so then I got a word about that and it like calmed like all my fears.
Right.
the word, he soothed my doubts and he calmed my fears. And so I found out that there was a balance to what he called me to do and what I want. Because at the time I had wanted to go to school. I decided that I wanted to be an architect. Because like one thing, my mother, she was beating our heads. Like, what you gonna do? Like I would say, well, I'm gonna be a preacher. She said, what you gonna do for money? She's her thing was you have to have an outside skill.
Right.
Because even Apostle Paul at one time he had to go make tents.
Right. Right.
And so I decided that I was gonna, because like my dad, he always had us in like one of his favorite hobbies was comic books, and so he gave us comic books to get us to read them. I'm like, not all of us read them, but I was one of the main ones who read them, and so I loved comic books, and so like one of the things was he wanted us to know and want and desire the attributes of being a hero. So he gave us comic books. And so then I always loved to draw, and then always had a thing for HGTV, and so I decided to take the two together, and I was going to be pursue architecture, and so that was my goal, and so I was starting to pursue that, and then I was going to a local community college out here. And I was doing drafting, as a beginning stages, whatever. And so then I was in a car accident in 2002, April 27, 2002. And I was in the car with my older sister Gina. She was driving, and somebody ran like a red blinking light, like saw us and then stopped in the middle of the road, and she couldn't get out of the way in time. And so on impact, my left knee hit the dashboard, which then caused the femur bone, which is the longest bone in your body, to like snap to like almost a form of a T.
Wow.
And then the ball of the femur, which is connected to your hip bone, like shattered the left side of my pelvic bone. And so I was in, and so from that, I was in the hospital for about 5 weeks. I had over 18 hours of surgery. Like I've got scars that goes from like my knee to like the middle of my back. I've got rods and screws and bolts in my femur bone and in my hips and stuff. And then later on we found out that I had extensive nerve damage in my left side. So it was like almost everything kind of went up in smoke. And so while I was in the hospital, I asked, I was praying. I said, God, I need to know that you're with me. And and the anointing came in, and and I just felt peace. And so, because I'm kind of condensing the story, because then you're talking about almost 20 years of the story, but while I was in recovery, while I was recovering and stuff, I fell into cooking. Like you can tell that I'm an overweight. Been overweight my entire life, and it's been a back and forth struggle or whatever. But because of my size, my dad he didn't want me. He really didn't want me in the kitchen because he didn't want to feed habit, feed the beast, I guess. But and so then I found a thing. I found a passion for cooking while I was recovering. And so then one day we were in service, and the Lord and a word came that God was going to give us. It was going to start giving some people like witty ideas and inventions to make money. And a couple of days later, I was trying to go to sleep, couldn't go to sleep, and God gave me He gave me a recipe for cheesecakes. And
They're so good.
I have over 20 different recipes of cheesecakes, and so then that started me down a different career path. And so kind of going all the way back, you know, um, you could have dreams and goals and aspirations, but your ministry has to come first.
Right.
Because going back, um, over 20 years now,
Mm-hmm.
it goes back to when I was 15, 16, saying, God, I have these dreams, I have these goals, these aspirations, but I'll lay all that aside
Mm.
to follow you.
Right.
And so you're talking 20 years of God leading and directing, but my goal has always been, I'll turn that aside and I'll follow you.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes we don't do that.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
not willing to do that.
Yeah. That surrender part is that surrender part is always tough for a lot of people, me included. But for you to have that heart for, God, I have dreams, I have aspirations, I have things that I love, but I'm willing to put all that aside, to serve you and do whatever it is that you've called me to do, whether it is preaching or pastoring or, just sitting in the booth like how I was, like how you were, I'm willing to do whatever it takes. And so, once you found out that, pastoring is what I'm going to be doing, were you excited? Were you nervous? Were you just like, well, this is what I always wanted anyway?
Kind of, this is what I always wanted, anyways. uh, yeah, I kind of would have to say that. But then I would never accept the title if I wasn't ordained of it. Like it
Mm-hmm.
was at one point something that happened, and so then my dad, um, I think it was partly because he just really didn't care to deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
He wanted to just to say, well, you know what, you be pastor, you handle. That's like, and so then I said no. I said because I have not been ordained for that.
Mm.
I don't, and I said I'm not going to take that title if I'm not ordained.
Mm-hmm.
I said you can call me a church administrator or something, but I will not.
Right.
Don't give me that title.
Mm-hmm.
You know. Um,
How humble of you. Because there's a lot of people that are chasing those titles.
yeah.
They want that pastor. They want that apostle, prophet. They want those titles, but you went into it humbly, knowing, yeah, I do want that you want to be a pastor and you want to preach, but you
Mm-hmm.
understood that, that there's steps to it. There's levels to it.
Mm-hmm.
So, oh, yeah, yeah. I had ministered at a youth event and they kept calling me Reverend Redmond, and I'm like, hold on, please don't put that on me because I'm not a reverend. I'm not a pastor. I have not been ordained. That's not a title that I want to take because I understand the accountability and the responsibility that comes with being a pastor or an ordained minister, and there's I'm sure that there's struggles that you've had to overcome. What were some of those struggles that you've had to overcome in, being a young pastor?
Thank you for calling me young.
You're still part of the youth.
Listen, when I hit 30, I was told, you 30, you ain't youth no more.
Oh, if that's the case, I only got about a year left now.
Yeah, busted my bubble when she said it too. I was like, But it's funny because now I can turn around and say it to her. So,
Oh, yep, she didn't cross that 30 threshold. So
yeah. Um, Everyone knew my heart and everybody knew me. So there was never a real issue that I could think of, that a challenge of me becoming ordained.
mm,
I took it seriously.
yeah,
Like even beforehand, like I won't. If something happens, I will not allow myself to walk into the church upset.
mm-hmm.
I won't. If I need to take a couple minutes in the car and like woosah and get it out, I'll do that.
Mm-hmm.
But I refuse to walk into the church upset
Mm,
or angry or sad. And some stuff you can't help.
yeah,
Um, like I remember one day right before I was getting up to minister, we got some bad news about a family member being in the hospital, and this was like somebody on my mother's side, and so and so then it was like with this particular person, it was like earth shattering because this person is like one of the most healthiest people we know. And so then situations like that you can't help it, but if if I'm getting into an argument, if there's an argument or something that happened, I won't allow myself to go into the house of God upset or down or anything like that.
Right.
Because when I'm in there, I have to minister.
Exactly.
If I was just singing a song, how am I going to sing and minister up under the anointing while I'm mad? And so I try to make sure that I don't take that I'm not operating underneath the flesh
Right.
when I come into the house of God, and I take that very seriously. Like if somebody else was or arguing around me, if it was like family or something, they was arguing, I'm like, look, we gotta go to church, knock it off, cool it, because we can't be going to the house of God and minister and stuff, and then we'd be upset
Right.
because you can't be effective in that air in that vein in that air.
Exactly.
So I've always, so I haven't, so I really haven't. Thankfully, I haven't had any real issues. There were maybe like a few instances where some things had to have been addressed. Because like one thing with family that I've seen is with people with family members and stuff in ministry, is that they can't differentiate the sibling or cousin. They can't separate the pastor from the family member.
Yeah.
And so then at times they won't give the due respect towards the pastor because they can't separate
The
the
relationship.
relationship
Yeah.
from the title.
Yeah.
And so there may have been one or few instances where I was upset because it was a thing of respect the title.
Yeah.
You can be upset about something, I can understand that. But then I'm also a logical person because I have, like you said, I have 6 sisters.
Yeah.
It is very easy to get into a vein of just head spinning and snapping and clapping with every syllables and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's very easy, but it's actually more effective to hit them with logic.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, cause seeing you come up and you when I was there the day that you got ordained, and seeing it kind of took some adjusting too. It's like, oh yeah, he's not just my cousin anymore. He's my pastor, and I think for me, one of the moments where uh, you know, I saw your pastoral role really elevating outside of, you were obviously preaching more but when you had took the time to help me in my life when I was at a low moment. Last year I had some highs, some lows, some good things, some bad things, but you were aware enough spiritually and naturally to see that I was struggling. And you took the time as, as the pastor to pull me aside and say, hey, I see that you've been dealing with some things, is there anything, and you talked to me and you worked me through it. And even when I did hit like the lowest of the lows that I've ever been in my life, you were still there to not only give me direction, but give me comfort and, point me in the right direction, which was towards God. And, I always, I always tell people, at my church, if you ain't doing right, you ain't living holy, you're not on the pulpit. And, I thank you for taking that time to take me off of the pulpit, to give me time to, get things right and get my walk right with the Lord. And, because there's some churches where they musicians, they other deacons or whatever, they mess up bad.
Right.
And they'll still let them preach, they'll still let them play, but the one thing that I've always loved and admired about our church is the holiness.
Mm-hmm.
We are about holiness and doing what's right. And so when you did that for me last year through all that, it just really made me, really see that, you are really growing as a pastor. Cause that was a low moment for me.
Mm-hmm.
That was a low moment for me, but you were there.
Yeah, and then also, um, at times I had to I took my emotions out of it
Mm-hmm.
because like it was one day, and that wasn't even at your lowest point.
Mm-hmm.
That you're referring to. Like it was something that happened before then that you did. I was spitting bullets.
Yeah.
Like I was spitting bullets.
I remember.
and and but I didn't come to you while
Mm-hmm.
I was spitting bullets.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and actually, I came. Did I? No, I didn't. And I think it was that was before the first time I may have talked to you.
Mm-hmm.
But when I talked to you, I didn't come to you in anger.
Yeah.
Um, because because like it was somebody I was standing next to somebody, and you whatever you did that made me upset. Um, because I was about to preach.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was about to preach, and then and something happened, and I was mad, and I was spitting bullets, and but I had to I had to calm myself down, and so you can't with it, in that position in my position, I can't always respond
Mm.
with my emotions. You cannot respond with your emotions
Yeah.
because I'm human. It's flesh,
Exactly.
and then I don't need, and then I have to make sure because the devil may be working to somebody else,
Mm-hmm.
but then he's working on you at the same time,
Right. Right.
and because he don't just play one side, he plays the whole field.
Mm.
You don't play chess going one piece at a time. You look at the board.
Yeah.
You look at all the pieces and where they're positioned and what this piece will do over here and what that person can potentially do.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have to make sure that even though the devil's working over here, that I have to make sure that I'm not aiding him.
Right.
Because if I came to you while I was mad spitting bullets,
Mm-hmm.
or then it would have made the situation with you worse.
Mm-hmm.
Or if I had gotten up and started to minister while I was still mad spitting bullets,
Mm.
then I couldn't be as effective as I needed to be in that moment while I was ministering.
Right.
So I can't. So at times you got to take yourself
Out of it.
out of the equation.
And I've always thought that was just one of the things that would, to me, outside looking in, one of the hardest things about pastoring and really just being in ministry in general is that you really have to take yourself, your emotions out of it. Because essentially you're dealing with people and people are going to be people.
Mm-hmm.
People are going to be people. The devil's going to be the devil. But in the midst of all that, you still have to be led and you still have to keep your composure. And so to be able to be as angry as I'm sure that you were and still take the time to say, I understand that, this is not only natural, but this is a spiritual thing. And
Mm-hmm.
then to come to me in a peaceful way, that's a testament to you. And because I know, me, I have emotions and, sometimes I get angry at my brothers and you just want to lash out, just one time, just want to lash out. And I remember Spencer is very good at picking with me. He's my brother. And it was one particular day where I was just not in a good mood. Usually I'm good. He messed with me. I rub it up. I just water on the duck's back. It's just Spencer. One day I was just not having a good day, and I just pushed him, and he ran into the corner of the wall, cut his eye, got stitches. Now my mom's mad at me, and it just didn't end up being a good day. But you having to control your emotions and be led in everything that you do. I always looked at it one of the hardest things about pastoring.
Yeah, because pastoring, you have to have the right temperament,
Mm-hmm.
and you can be, and somebody can say, "Well, I'm human," blah blah blah. Yeah, but Moses didn't go to the promised land because he
Right.
he got in his feelings.
Yeah.
Elijah went to heaven early, probably because and into his ministry early because he was in his feelings because he wanted to go.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so you have to be able to separate yourself. So some people you got to have the right temperament to be able to separate your emotions and your feelings from what you need to do spiritually. And if you can't take the time to you have to be able at times to stop because you ain't always in the spirit.
Mm-hmm.
You is not always in the spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to be able to stop, calm yourself, separate yourself, and then get into the spirit.
Mm.
Um, because when we found out that we had to change locations on our church because of the situation had changed with the tenants, and literally we actually we actually started our service late because we were dealing with this.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because we had to have like an emergency meeting, like what we gonna do, what we gonna do, and so then I just like in the midst of the meeting, while my dad's on the phone because he was on his way. We was our minister Sharon Griffin. She was back there. My mom was back there, and I just kind of like leaned back and just kind of like calm myself, stepped out of the situation. I began to pray, and I just and I got sensibility, calm and sensibility in my spirit,
Mm-hmm.
and and I just I said, you know what, I feel fine. Like everything will be okay.
Felt the peace.
Yeah, I just felt the peace.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, when we told other when we had to tell other our church members, you know, some of them got upset, and it was like a text that kind of went around like we can't, we need to pray and intercede and claim, and pray this,
Mm-hmm.
we don't have to take this, blah blah blah, but the stuff changed with the tenants. It's out of our hands.
Right.
Ain't nothing we can do.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so we didn't even have the option to. Yeah, I mean, we were left with no option.
Mm-hmm.
Like we didn't have enough time to like gather some options to see what we can do. We had literally no
No.
options.
Wow.
And so you have to be able to you have to be able to pull yourself away.
Mm.
And so then that takes um and it maybe it helped having six sisters, even though I just can't believe I just said that.
You heard it here first, folks.
Maybe it helped because I'm a man.
Yeah.
You know, you had, you have all your brothers.
Yeah.
Y'all got arguing and stuff. Y'all can eventually come to blows and blow off that steam.
Yeah.
I couldn't do that.
Mm.
And so I had to find other ways to blow off my steam.
Mm-hmm.
Now, so I became very good at pestering my sisters because I couldn't handle the situation like how I wanted to. So maybe growing up knowing that you can't handle it how you want to,
Helped you to.
maybe that helped.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just don't tell them that.
Secret safe with me, but not for YouTube. Other than that, but that's really great. I think that's something that a lot of pastors and people who want to be in ministry need to hear is that, you have to take yourself out of it. And I think, there's been pastors who have fallen, because they weren't able to take themselves out of it. And, it is hard sometimes. I'm sure there are times where, maybe a member has done something and you're just angry, or maybe a member does something and it's just kind of hurt because you've invested in them. And you growing up with your father, for example, I'm sure there were plenty times where he invested in some of the members, but they just ended up going whatever way that they went, and still having to put your feelings aside
Yeah.
is it's really hard sometimes.
Yeah, and I shared the story yesterday in service that one day my father he was out at this function and then he saw um, he saw some people that were kids in the church when they first started, and he saw how their lives turned out.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because either their parents fell away or they fell away, and they was doing their own thing, and so then it was quite a few of them that was around him. But by the time he got home, he was down and upset and everything. And so then I remember he was talking with my older sister Gina, and he looked all sad with like hurt in his eyes. He was like, What could I have done?
Mm-hmm.
What could I have said? I mean, how could I have reached out and um, what could I have done different to help them keep them from turning and doing the things that they've done, living the lives that they've loved, that they've turned away from God? What could I have done?
Yeah.
And so then, you know, like my sister had to reassure him, like, Dad, you did everything that you could.
Mm-hmm.
You can't, don't beat yourself up about this. Because it's like some of them people I didn't even know.
Yeah.
Because they have been gone for so long.
Yeah.
You know, or they left when I was like too young to remember them.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's always weird you bumping into somebody. Oh, I remember when you was a little kid. And I don't know who the heck you are, lady. Because they were there, but they left, you know, when I was, you know, too little to remember.
Yeah.
Um, and if that's especially for me, I said especially for like my younger sister Tina, who's in her mid-20s.
Yeah.
Like they don't remember these people.
Yeah. That happens pretty often. I don't be remembering people.
Yeah. So I mean, you have to have you have to have a heart.
Mm. Yeah.
But then you know the devil would also use that to beat you up about it, like you almost feeling like you failed.
Mm-hmm.
Like he plays, like I said, he plays the whole field.
He does. He does. And it's just always, there's always that weight that comes with being a pastor that, if I'm honest, has kind of always scared me away from wanting to go into ministry is, just the responsibility that comes with it, the accountability that comes with it, and, the things that you have to do because, you know, like you said, you got to have great temperament because you're
Mm-hmm.
dealing with people, and it always seemed like that's a lot, and if I could avoid that,
Mm-hmm.
I will, but I don't think I can. So I've been able to sit and watch you and watch how you've grown into your ministry, and I've always been close with your father and travel with him, and I've always watched and gleaned from him, and you are a great example of what a pastor is and what a pastor should be.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, and then this, you know, in some things it's trial and error too.
Hmm.
Because you know, like in our church, we'll say, you know, turn to your neighbor and say neighbor, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
You know, other ministers have their own thing. Like TD Jakes, he'll say slap somebody, slap somebody and tell them, you know. And so that I remember one day I was going to use that line and then try and just like playfully like rev up like Jake's did, like yeah, you know, try that. But I never got past slap somebody. Because everybody in our church started looking like what's the name from like Sanford and Sons, like come on sucker, you know, like, and I just said, oh, this ain't gonna work. I said, well, high five somebody you don't want to slap, and I said, well, this ain't gonna work.
Yeah.
So you know, there's been a little bit of trial and error, but you know, and like one thing, like you've seen, like you've heard my message and stuff. See, you know, I've come up with some with with like catchy titles and things like that.
Hmm.
But then I don't believe in being too witty and catchy with stuff.
Yeah.
Um, like um, like what's his name that did like rub the spit on his brother's face and something
Oh
like
yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But I remember I was in one service where they had this one pastor up, and he was exhorting, he was like revving up and everything, and people was going, "Hey man, yeah, yeah, yeah." And so, but he kind of ended his his exhortation with. He's like, the reason why God has put you on this earth is because you are here for a reason.
Come on, man.
I was sitting there and I went, what?
What?
What? And then somebody had to shush me because I was starting to get a little loud because it was just, there was no point to that.
Yeah.
Like you try to be catchy for no reason.
Yeah.
Like there's no substance to it.
Right.
I don't. I've listened to messages my entire life, whether it was just from like my dad, my grandmother, special guest speakers, TBN, Daystar, all this stuff. I've listened to a lot.
Mm-hmm.
You got to have some substance.
Yeah, you do.
And so I've never liked generalities. I've never liked fluff.
Okay, but that's actually kind of funny that you bring up that about Michael Todd. What did you think of that as a pastor when he rubbed the spit on his eyes?
I didn't even watch the whole thing. I just heard about it. I mean, I saw a clip of him. I didn't watch the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Of him leading up to it. Obviously, he had a point. He had a point at it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're gonna do something weird like that, you got to be led.
Yeah.
Because there's no way. Because I already know in our church, there's no way that could have flown.
Right. Yeah. Definitely not.
Because nobody would have paid attention to any word after that in the service.
Mm-hmm.
Because I just
Yeah.
I would have lost half of them just on that alone.
Yeah.
But then I start spitting in my hand.
Yeah, that was.
I could have went and washed my hands after that. Every time I moved my hand afterwards, they'd look at my hand.
Yeah.
They'd be disgusted.
Yeah.
Would nobody come to the altar?
No.
Because nobody was going to get laid hands on.
And that was a thing about it. Like, it was obviously nasty.
Yeah.
And I don't think he was led in doing it, but it took away from whatever the message was about. Because I can't even tell you what the message was about. Right. All that you saw was that this guy spit in this guy's hands. And I can't think about anything else other than that.
Yeah. And then it made him... See, the thing about... You cannot... It brought a negative light on the gospel.
Yeah, yeah.
And so you have to think about that as well. You try to make a point. You try to be catchy or whatever. Mm-hmm. Or innovative or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. But if it's bringing a negative light on the gospel, you can't do that.
Yeah.
Like my father's pastor, Ralph Hart. One day he was ministering and the Lord told him to spit in the man's eyes. Mm-hmm. And he ignored God at first and he kept going. And God kept telling him to spit in his eyes, spit in his eyes, spit in his eyes. Mm-hmm. And he's like, well, God, why? That's a repugnant thing. Why do you want me to spit in his eyes? He said, because if I spit in his eyes, I'll heal him so he can see. Mm. And so then eventually he walks up to the man. He said, man, sir, can I spit in your eyes? He said, why do you want to spit in my eyes? He said, because God said, if I spit in your eyes, he'll heal you. Mm-hmm. So you can see. Mm-hmm. He said, well, spit all over me. See, but he didn't move. See, he didn't want to do it at first, but he finally did it because that's what God told him to do. Yeah. And then he went and got the man's permission to spit in his eyes. Mm-hmm. And then he was healed. Yeah. So there was a reason to that. Yeah. God, Jesus spat in the clay, made clay, and it put over the man's eyes. There was a reason for that. Mm-hmm. His healing was reliant upon that. Mm-hmm. And so I remember somebody, I think somebody was ministering, and they said that when, they would put like something on it, like something on a leaf for like healing properties over a wound or something, mm-hmm. and then use mud to cover it. So, because this is before bandages and adhesives and stuff. So then he was putting the stuff over his eyes as kind of like a healing adhesive, mm-hmm. which if I'm not butchering that. Yeah. But what he did didn't make sense.
No, it didn't. And I what do you think of a lot of these big pastors around today. Do you think there's something that this new generation of pastors are missing? Because from what I've seen, it just seems like it's a lot of theatrics and not a lot of power.
Well, I'll also just to give a caveat, we're not in the services all the time. And they're not airing everything that's shown. Like in our services, we don't air everything that's shown,
Right.
and that's also probably because I don't want everything shown.
Yeah.
Because some, with music and everything, because like we're renting, and so with like our sound system and stuff, it's not our sound system,
Yeah.
and so we can't go back there and tinker with it to perfection, because we can come back, because this has happened before, because we was in another building where there was like this consistent hum throughout the system, and so then I had finally figured it out, and I got rid of the hum. Everything sounded fine, everything sounded great, and I got rid of the hum. Came back the next week, hum was returned, everything's back to normal. I'm like, okay, not my system, can't do anything.
Yeah.
So certain aspects of things, it's not going to come out as perfect as we want. So that's why there's certain things like when we sing in like the song service and stuff, like we don't live stream that.
Yeah.
And then and honestly, sometimes God will speak something for just people who's there.
Yeah, that's true.
And I would rather that you decide to come out to the service instead of just staying at home.
Yeah.
So you're not going to. So we can only see what they're presenting.
Yeah.
So we're not there for the full service. We're not there for all the services.
Right.
So sometimes I'm willing to give a ministry a benefit of the doubt to an extent because I'm not seeing everything.
Yeah.
I don't have the full picture.
Yeah.
And they may just present like whatever service they're using to record. They may have it set up to just be like that. So, but I do believe that with certain, and then also with Christian television program, studios and channels and stuff, that's still a business.
That's true.
That's still a business. My father, he tried to shoot a commercial, and Comcast wouldn't approve it. Because in his commercials, he was talking about healing the sick, open blinded eyes, deaf ears unstopped, and so then they said they wouldn't approve the commercial. He said, well, why don't you come out to the service and see what God's doing? They wouldn't do that. Because they're not going to promote something that somebody else can perceive correctly, or if it doesn't fit their model.
Yeah.
So, television products, that's still a product, that's still a business, and it may be a certain thing that they want to air, some things they don't. But I do believe that there should be a greater emphasis on flowing with the Spirit, having a relationship with God. Ministering. Anybody can stand there and preach and teach, but when you're flowing under the anointing, that's a different thing.
Yeah.
I like to put it as like a surfer riding a wave. Like you have no control over the waves. You don't have a machine out in the ocean that's generating a vibration that's sending out the shock waves for the waves to build up. All you're pedaling out there. And I'm not a surfer, so I'm just speculating just on what I've seen.
Yeah.
Because I don't think I can stand up on that board.
Shoot, me neither.
Nerve damage and stuff. I couldn't. My balance will be off anyways. But them riding the wave, and it's basically them just going with the flow. And so there are times when you're ministering, and God can be speaking to you about something Sometimes you had to stop the service because you had to minister to somebody. I remember I was up and I was minister, and I was looking and um, the Lord was leading me to minister to somebody, and then but when I saw them, like they didn't light up. It was almost like waves,
Yeah.
like vibrations was coming off of them,
Yeah.
like off on the sides of them. Like if you remember, like the X-Men '95 cartoon with Xavier when he showed his telepathic abilities, you saw like the waves.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I saw with her, and so then I called her out. Didn't know yet what was, what God wanted me to speak, and so, you know, I prayed and I just went with the leading, and come to find out, she had gotten in the word that I gave her. She had actually been praying because she had gotten the same word some years ago, but she was looking for it, couldn't find it, and so then I turned around and gave the exact same word that she was looking for.
Wow.
Because all I was doing was just following the leading
Yeah.
and going with the flow. And so I think there needs to be an importance of that. There needs to be an emphasis on that.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's fun.
Amen.
I remember one time we was in the service and I looked and there was a woman. She was halfway like the middle of the sanctuary, and so I called her out, and I was ministering. I started pointing to her, and then she just it just like fell back. And in that moment, you kind of just want to, because it was a shock because I didn't know that was gonna happen.
Yeah.
But but when I pointed at her, like the anointing like went out and it hit her,
Yeah.
and like I was nowhere near her. So it's just being led and going with the flow.
Yeah.
But you can't do that if you don't have a relationship
Yeah.
with the Lord. You can't do that if you're not praying like you should.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. That actually reminds me when I was in Mexico, and I remember the first time the Lord used me this way. I had seen, the Lord use people and they would, blow on them and then they would fall out. You see like Benny Hinn using the jacket and, things of that nature. Mm-hmm. And so I had felt the Lord telling me to, blow on this person. I'm like, we've been eating Mexican food for the last week. I don't know if I really want to blow on somebody like this, but I kept hearing the Lord say to do it. So, I was praying for them and I blew on them and they just fell out and just kind of like you said, just yeah, I got it. I'm flowing in it now.
yeah, you just got to be careful because then that's at that one moment, that's self.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you have to fight the urge. It's there, but then that's self.
Yeah. That humility. You need it. You need it. Well, this has been a wonderful, wonderful podcast. I know there's a lot of people that are going to listen to this and, really soak in a lot of the good things that you said, is, especially about being a pastor's kid and then becoming a pastor. And for those of you who are looking for a church, we have a wonderful church. It's called it's called Rochester
Hills Christian Center.
Rochester Hills Christian Center, and it's 3555 West Auburn Road,
yeah.
Rochester Hills, Michigan. And wonderful pastor Keith Gino Barr Jr. is our pastor, and you can come and see some miracles. Do you got any socials like to follow you or anything, or follow the church?
You can find us on Facebook, same name. Lord have mercy. What is the name of that web address? Well, just go to the Facebook page.
You can find it on Facebook.
I was going to say the church website, but I can't remember the website name because we had just did some changes. So
yeah. Well, it'll all be in the description, the links to the Facebook and to the Instagram page for the church. And we just pray that you all were blessed by this. And any closing remarks?
Come out, enjoy yourself, be led. Don't blow your finger after you pray for people.
Don't walk in that pride. Stay humble. Stay humble. Oh, service times on Sunday are at 1 p.m.
1 o'clock, 1 p.m. And our Friday night service is at 7 p.m.
these services be on fire. I'm trying to tell you. But the link will be in the description. So I pray that you all blessed, and thanks for listening to God Talk with Gabriel.
Back to the work again, back on this grind. Back on my feet to stand, back to the times. Back to deliverance, still in my prime. Back so the thoughts won't keep pressing my mind.